This is Amir Jacobs. My debate topic is autonomous commercial flights and the argument in favor of them. So, when you think about traveling, where does your mind go? You got cars, buses, bikes, but when you're trying to get somewhere far, fast, you're either going to be taking a train or a plane. And most people take planes overall. And there's a good reason for that. They're reliable for the most part. They're fast. They can cover a lot of mileage without stopping. Yeah, a lot of good reasons to take a plane. But when you get down to like the actual facts about air travel, they're quite astounding. So, in this country alone, on average per day, there are about 45,000 flights that go out. I don't know about you, that was pretty mind blowing. Even though it does make a lot of sense at the end of the day. So 45,000 plus on average, so that could be more or less, and that ends up totaling about a few 10 million flights at the end of the year, and that's this country alone. That's not even factoring in international flights. But the reason I bring that up is because when we think about flying, obviously we need people to fly the planes. Pilots, people who are trained to do so, and they do a really good job. I will not knock them. For the most part, they do a fantastic job at what they do. But pilots are still human at the end of the day. And I think that human error in a job as relatively intensive when you think about what pilots have to go through, is definitely a melting pot for disaster, and it often can be. That isn't to say that pilots are bad at their jobs, but that error, because they're human being, is just always present. And that isn't to say that pilots have it easy, because they definitely don't. Pilots definitely have to go through a lot of training, and on top of the training, they have to go through a number of procedures before takeoff, while the plane is flying, and then before landing. So in between those times, there's definitely a lot of opportunity for people to mess up, especially considering the amount of things they have to do before even the pre-flight checks. And I think I think the introduction and regulation of autonomous commercial flights would definitely help mitigate a lot of that stuff. But even beyond just human error, there are things that pilots can't control themselves. As I said, they're human, and humans definitely have to maintain and regulate their own selves, and that comes with a lot of steps as well as issues if not maintained well. When you think about the job of a pilot, obviously it mainly entails flying planes, but that comes with a lot of underlying issues or things that we don't really think about. So obviously pilots, being humans, have to eat, sleep, drink, and them being these pretty much ferrymen of the skies, having to be ready to go anywhere at any time, crossing through multiple time zones, that definitely takes a toll on your body after a while. And there was actually even a study I read that took into account how changing time zones, I guess like not rapidly, but like fairly often, can really mess up with like the internal clock that we rely on. Because humans have this thing called I think the circadian rhythm that kind of dictates how their body regulates itself, at least in terms of like sleeping. But when you're telling a person, hey, we need you to fly to Mumbai in like 4 hours, you're going to be crossing through like 2 time zones, so I'm gonna need you to get like 12 hours of sleep yesterday. Yeah, that having to do that too often definitely isn't the best idea for making sure a person is still a person at the end of their life. And I think autonomous commercial flights can definitely mitigate a lot of that. What would be a good word for that? I don't know, you know what I mean, but would mitigate a lot of the need for people to have to like constantly switch up or like readjust themselves when it comes to flying. And another issue that really, I guess, only popped up recently is the fact that, last year going through the pandemic, which we're still kind of going through at the same time, there were a lot less flights going out, which meant a lot of pilots were out of jobs, so they had to like sustain themselves with other methods. But obviously, we're going back to normal these days. But the issue with that is you have these people who have been out of work in this field that they've been specialized in for so long that they start doing things wrong. Like I read definitely a few different articles where pilots have been out of work so long that they forget to do certain things at a pre-flight check. I think I read of one pilot even forgot to bring up the emergency brake when he was taking off, and that severely damaged the gear to the point it had to get replaced. Some have reported that pilots are flying too fast, too high, too low, and definitely I shouldn't really need to have to tell you how dangerous that is when it comes to like the safety of both the crew and the passengers. So obviously, enough about pilots, but like I think these have definitely been arguments for why autonomous commercial flights could be necessary. But at the end of the day, I think there are a lot of, well, no, yeah, they go hand in hand, I'd say. So the human error issue, autonomous commercial flights can definitely like streamline and become more efficient when it comes to pre-flight checks as well as like in-air checks and pre-landing checks. And I think it makes the most sense to introduce them, or like to introduce them more and regulate them, because when you consider how planes are flown already, a good portion of the flying is already done by computer systems on board. You've heard of autopilot. You know what autopilot is, obviously. But why not just take that step further? There's definitely room for this technology to grow, but I think the technology has more room and more, what's the word? It definitely has more room and more potential to improve as time goes on, as they're introduced into more flights. And as they're introduced into more flights, you definitely help mitigate more and more risk in the potential that pilots do make mistakes. Pilots who haven't flown in a while are back flying. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think they're a really good idea if we're really gonna like start pushing deeper into advancing the way we transport ourselves and our goods. But yeah, that's been my argument for why I'm in favor, or why I'm in favor of autonomous commercial flights as long as they're regulated. All right.